Good afternoon. It's Thursday, April 17th. Happy birthday both to my father and my mother's mother. We're not going to talk about ages. We're just going to say happy birthday. I will get a chance to catch up with them via Zoom soon. Today's Thursday, and I'm here with Dr. Kaufman from the Brookline Center. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and we're going to talk about mental health today as it relates to COVID-19. And there's a lot of different parts to this conversation, and I think it's a really important one. And so, Dr. Kaufman, thank you for coming on. We'll get to our conversation in a minute, but I'd like to start by giving folks the state and local changes in law and policy in the past week as they relate to COVID-19, and I've got a bit of a list. The first thing is that for nearly all students, there will be no MCAS testing this spring. It is not required for graduation, and the legislature, we passed a law enabling the executive branch to cancel MCAS contingent on a federal waiver, which was received. And so we will leave it to the Brookline School Committee to explain the details. But MCAS took a pause this year, and for pretty clear, good reason. The legislature also was able to increase flexibility for budgeting, specifically related to the MBTA. They are in a multi-$100 million hole because people aren't buying fares. And so they need some budget flexibility, and we were able to do that. Today, the House and Senate both passed a bill that came through conference committee related to housing. And there's a couple of different details there that I want to just briefly mention. It's expected the governor will sign it, and everything I'm about to tell you, you better double check either with my office or with the law before you act too clearly on it. And as a reminder, this is me, Tommy Vitolo. You can call me at 617-872-8921. That's my cell phone. Call anytime. My email is tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. You can email me anytime. So I want to tell you a little bit about this bill for housing. It approaches both tenants who are renting, and it approaches residential mortgages. And so for apartments, there is a residential eviction moratorium on non-essential evictions. And what that means is some evictions are still permitted, but simply because you're not able to pay your rent is not one of them. So you don't get to be a danger to the building. And if the building is a danger and people have to be removed, that can still happen. But if you don't have the money to make rent, you cannot be evicted, providing the governor signs the bill. Furthermore, if the tenant certifies that non-payment is due to COVID-19, non-payment cannot show up on your credit report, and the landlord cannot assess late fees. The tenant's last month, you pay your first and last month and a deposit often when you sign a lease. That last month's rent that the landlord already has can be used to fill that hole if you don't have enough to make rent. And courts, sheriffs, constables, their working procedures have been updated so that they are going to respect this as well. So the courts can't process an eviction, a sheriff can't serve a notice, and so forth. For mortgages, foreclosures are prohibited in the immediate future. And also, forbearance must be granted without interest or fees. And so if a person contacts the bank that holds their mortgage and says, I can't pay right now, they can get forbearance and essentially defer that payment. The details are really important. And so don't take what I just said and stop paying your housing bills, right? Be careful, be thoughtful, make sure you completely understand how this policy impacts your situation, because we want people to get this right. But it is exciting, it's very important. Congratulations, I think, are due to many, not least of which is Chair Kevin Honan from Alston, just next door, who is the chair of housing, who really helped make sure this happened, amongst quite a few others. And lastly, I want to mention that beginning Friday, if you are in Brookline and you are outside, you are required to wear face covering that covers your nose and your mouth. It can be a homemade mask, it can be a medical mask, but you must cover your nose and your mouth if you are anywhere in the public way, anywhere in public. And that begins this Friday, the 17th. So those are the updates for the week. Let's bring that camera back. Here we go. That wouldn't have happened if we were in Brookline Interactive Studio, but here we are at home, and my amateur cameraman is this box holding up my computer. So we make mistakes. So we want to talk with Dr. Kaufman. Can you first sort of tell us about the Brookline Center? Some folks know about it, many don't, and it's such a wonderful resource. So share with us a little bit about the center.
Thanks so much. And I want to thank you for having me on and allowing me to talk a little bit about what we do. The Brookline Center for Community Mental Health has been around for more than 60 years, actually. It was founded in the late 50s at a time when mental hospitals were looking to put themselves out of business. It was not generally a great model for mental health. And a bunch of clinicians in Brookline came together and said, how can we set up an institution to serve people in the community, living in the community instead of in hospitals? And it continues with the mission to this day of trying to provide a sort of catch-all center, a one-stop shopping, so to speak, for a whole range of mental health needs. So in-house, we provide individual psychotherapy. We run groups for a variety of different populations. There's also family counseling and marriage counseling. Those are my specialties. And in addition, we interface with the town of Brookline and a variety of nonprofit organizations to provide services. So for example, we have staff that work in the senior living, such as the Center Communities of Brookline. We work very closely with the Brookline Housing Authority to provide mental health services and social services for families in BHA. And we work very, very closely with Brookline Public Schools in a variety of capacities to serve children and their families. So it's really a good place to know about. Statistics would say most Americans will have a need for mental health care at some point in their life. And to keep the Brookline Center in your Rolodex, so to speak, as a place to know to go where you can get all kinds of help.
And when you say you, are you referring solely to people who live in Brookline and can afford the services?
Thank you for reminding me. No, so our commitment is to service all comers regardless of ability to pay. We do tend to prioritize people who live in Brookline or work in Brookline. So that includes employees of the school system, town employees, people who work in retail in the town, Metco students. But we do try to focus on the needs of our community here as they evolve over time.
And so you have, I'm sure you have some clients that you've been working with for some time, certainly clients that predate mid-March of 2020. And I expect that many of those clients came to the Brookline Center on a regular basis and met with therapists or others one-on-one or in group, but in person. I suspect that is not happening now. So can you kind of walk us through how you've adapted at the center, how the clients have adapted, maybe if state or national law had to change to allow for some of this? How does that work now that you're no longer meeting in person?
Yeah, it's been a real team effort, and I want to compliment my bosses because and everyone I work with. I think as an organization, we've done an incredible job of turning on a dime. I mean, it was literally, there was a Thursday when we were talking about home visits with precautions, and by that Monday we were up and running with telehealth. So we've managed to, we have a sort of a skeleton staff at the Brookline Center to run our administrative operations and for acute care. So if somebody urgent to be seen for a medical evaluation or a psychological evaluation, we have a screening area where we can do that. But all the rest of the visits are being done virtually. with the telehealth platform. And it's definitely been an adjustment. On the clinical side, we have to figure out how to make this work so that people still feel like they're seen and heard and supported. There's also been challenges we hadn't anticipated, like how do we do our paperwork when we're used to having people come in and sign forms for us? How do we run billing? There's also been a tremendous effort on the part of Mass Health and the Department of Mental Health and private insurers in the state to allow billing for telehealth. Prior to the COVID crisis, there were a lot of restrictions on the ability to provide these services other than in a face-to-face setting. And those were greatly relaxed so that we could continue to provide services to our clientele. And so at this point, we're seeing 900 to 1,000 visits a week via telehealth. It's been pretty incredible.
And some of those, I imagine, are using a platform like Zoom, and others might actually just be the telephone. Is that right?
Yeah, we really have to adapt to the client's needs. The preference is telehealth so that there's eye contact and a back and forth. This has been especially challenging for seniors who may not have the technology they need or the capability to manage it. So in those cases, we've been using the telephone. It's a challenge any way you cut it, because this is not the way we were trained to work. This is not the way our clients are used to interfacing with us, and it's required a lot of flexibility on everyone's part. But it's certainly much, much better than nothing. And
That's right.
I would encourage anyone who's feeling like they are in need of help and are worried about what it would be like to try it. It's so much better than suffering by yourself.
And so even though you lose not just sometimes the eye contact, but some of the body language, right? We communicate more than just with our words. Obviously, a great percentage is with the words, and even if you're only on the telephone, no question that this is really a great example of the adaptability of so many people involved to quickly transition to a different way of doing things. And I'm hopeful that in the months to come, that we take some of the sort of forced experimentation and figure out what we can keep and what we can use going forward, that maybe we wouldn't have had the courage to try were it not for this remarkably challenging time we're in. And I suspect telehealth will be part of that, even if it's not as good as being in person. It may well be that it beats the other tangible alternatives at the time. So really hats off to folks for figuring out how to do this across the country, across the world. It's certainly not unique to Brookline, but it's really, everyone's learned at the same time. There hasn't been someone who went first and then, taught everyone else at medical school, right? We're sort of learning as we go. Can we talk a little bit about how do you think adults who aren't clients and who maybe don't have an active and ongoing mental health condition that would require treatment at this time, how are they doing? How are we as adults just kind of making it through day to day? And what are some things you think that are real stressors or that are fundamentally different for us working through these times from a mental health perspective?
Yeah, I do want to give the caveat that I'm speaking anecdotally. I don't have any public health data on this, but clearly what I'm seeing and my colleagues are seeing is on the plus side, our community is doing an incredible job of being collaborative and cooperative and kind and thoughtful. Every day when I go out for my exercise, I see Brookline sanitation workers getting ready for their shift, and nurses and doctors going into Franciscan's Hospital and St. E's, and police officers. And I think to myself, what a blessing it is that we are in this together and that people are still doing what needs to be done. On the downside, there's an incredible amount of stress that people just had no way to see coming. So businesses closed, people out of work, people unsure where their next paycheck will come. A fair amount of uncertainty about when government benefits that have been allotted will actually be delivered. Something we see a lot is people who live alone feeling the effects of isolation and fear. We see this especially in the senior communities where clients are really at high risk, and the buildings have had to take extra precautions to mind the safety of the residents, but that comes at the cost of them feeling extra isolated, almost like they're on lockdown in some cases. I do want to put a plug in for Springwell at Meals on Wheels has been delivered to seniors and folks in the community who rely on it, even despite this. Something I encounter a lot is family stress. So people who are lucky enough not to be going through this alone are also stuck with the people that they live with 24/7, and that can be incredibly difficult. So parents trying to work from home and keep their children enrolled in school and doing what they need to do there, just managing the daily stress. I think none of us realized how much the routine of our lives includes the time that we're not together as a family, when kids are at school and folks are at work or doing whatever they do during the day. And now that that's all been altered, it's a whole new set of challenges.
It's sort of, it's our own version of Little House on the Prairie, right? Where the nuclear family just does everything together all the time and everybody's in each other's business. And maybe that's not so stressful for Laura Wilder or whatever that character was. But I can tell you in my household, it is stressful. It is absolutely stressful. My wife is working full time, but that may not continue. And I've got a job up through January 1st, but I'm up for re-election, so there's some stress there. My two children, they're very different from each other. My son is like an indoor cat. The fear is that we'll just forget about him for too long and not check in on him, and he'll just be curled up on a couch reading a book or playing a video game, and he's very content. Gaining a few pounds. He's got to get outside and run a little bit, but we'll work through that. My daughter, on the other hand, she's 5 and she's a butterfly. She needs to be doing something different every 5 minutes. And she's in pre-kindergarten, so she doesn't have a lot of school structure, and she can't be expected to sit down and do a bunch of schoolwork all day. But we don't want her watching TV all day. And so trying to keep them alert and healthy and active is certainly a challenge. But I want to pick up on something you talked about earlier before we talk more about kids, and that is our seniors. As you mentioned, many of them live alone, and those who live in, particularly in larger buildings, what you said is absolutely true. As you can imagine, COVID-19 could spread very quickly through a very social senior building, and the ramification would be devastating. And we've actually seen this sort of impact at some nursing homes where infection has spread through, and it's been catastrophic. It's been really, really awful. And so what's happening is we have older adults who live in a small apartment. Maybe they have the ability to cook for themselves. Maybe that's limited. Hopefully they have family they can communicate with on the telephone or FaceTime, or if something like that. But if you are an older adult in this circumstance, or if you have a loved one in that circumstance, what can we do to help? What can we do to um, help them get through this, or recognize that we need more professional help?
Yeah, I do want to salute the people who staff the larger senior living communities in Brookline. I know it's been challenging keeping their employees healthy and on the job, and at least to my experience thus far, they've done an incredible job keeping their buildings running and keeping the seniors that live there safe. I would say if you know, even are just acquainted with a senior, pick up the phone, call them every few days, check in. Folks are incredibly lonely, and if they don't have a computer or a lot of tech savvy, they're really struggling to be part of the kind of things that are keeping a lot of the rest of us going. So they could really use a friendly voice on the other end of the line. And things like basic shopping, which can be challenging for seniors in the best of circumstances, have become really difficult. Getting to the store, and also there's a lot of anxiety. And I want to say, I think that's one of the mental health symptoms that I see the most prevalent as a result of this. People just not sure what's safe to do, what's okay and what's not. And so for some of the seniors I work with, they're not sure if it's okay to go to the store, if that's a good idea. So if you know somebody in that situation and you can drop off some groceries for them, go to the pharmacy for them, bring them a book, something, a DVD, just try to be mindful of the people in your network that may not be able to get onto a computer and FaceTime and Netflix and all the things that the rest of us are doing.
Thank you. I do want to go back to talk about older adults. Now I want to go to the youngsters. What can parents do, recognizing that the conversation with your 15-year-old looks different than with your 5-year-old? What can parents be doing to help their children stay comfortable and feel safe with respect to mental health? What can we be talking with them about? And similarly, what should we be looking for as signs that that they are struggling?
That's a great question. And it's a very fine line. I think it's important for families to do what they can to keep their kids on a schedule and to keep them active with school, but I think it's not necessarily the most important thing. So I think if you have to choose to have a huge fight with your kid about that extra hour of PlayStation time, or keeping them talking to you and trusting and not hold away in their room, the latter option is better. I think connection is the most important medicine for all of us right now. And I think I'm encouraging parents to maybe let some things slide that they wouldn't under better circumstances, for the sake of peace in the home and connection with kids, which is, I think, the best thing to keep them healthy. As far as the warning signs, I think they would be, similar to what you'd be looking for under conditions. So sleep, lack of sleep or irregular sleep, dramatic changes in diet, any signs that a child is harming themselves, self-harm, or talking about how they have no hope in life, despair. You'd be wanting to look for depression, anxiety. And if you have any concerns about your kids, call your PCP, call the Brookline Center. Don't worry alone, because there are people here to help your children. I think one important thing for us all to note as a community is that, there are a lot of people that help us keep eyes on our kids that we don't really realize. And that's primarily folks at the schools. There's a fascinating article in the Boston Globe a few days ago that reports of child abuse and neglect to the Department of Children and Families are actually way down, precipitously down right now. And you think, how can that be? All these families are locked up. There must be plenty of neglect and abuse. And the reason they think that is because a lot of those reports are made by teachers and coaches and guidance counselors and psychotherapists and PCPs, and there aren't eyes on kids. So I think in the spirit of your comment, keeping an extra good eye on your children and not hesitating to reach out for help if you have a concern, since you really are the first and the last line of defense in this case.
And
The other
an
thing
extra
I
hug
recommend,
now and again doesn't hurt anybody either, right?
yeah,
When it comes to your kids.
yeah, and acknowledging, I think with the little ones, the signs of stress aren't always so obvious. A toddler or a first or second grader may not say, mommy, daddy, I'm scared about the coronavirus, but they may be having trouble sleeping or wetting the bed or acting out, having tantrums, and those things may well be related. So I think both having extra tolerance if your kid's behavior is, especially little kids, is less than what you'd expect normally, and being sensitive that those might be signs that they are really very worried or confused, anxious about what's going on around them. I have to say, as parent to a second grader, myself in Brookline Public Schools, I think the schools have done a good job of talking to little ones about what's going on and continue to do a great job. So kudos to them. But I think keep in mind that they don't have the same eyes on your kids that they normally would. So you really need to be there for them in every way.
And what about high school and even college kids who really have a much stronger sense of self and independence, and sort of that exists explicitly outside the home, away from their parents? How do we support these children or young adults? We know that sometimes they're out and about right now, which is not healthy, in groups, because that's kind of what teenagers do. They go hang out in groups away from adults. That's what they do. And now is not the time for that, right? So what are there any suggestions you can give to parents of young adults in high school or in college who are now back to living at home, and maybe they're doing classes sort of kind of, how can, other than stay out of their way and leave them alone, what can parents do? Or is that really it? Should they just give them the space?
It's a balance, some space, but not too much. This is purely anecdotal, but a lot of what I'm hearing is that teenagers are faring pretty well relative to other segments of the population, in that they are very internet savvy and have endless things they want to do that don't involve face-to-face interaction. And they're pretty happy in their room, not needing the family a lot. And in some, the Brookline Center, the biggest population of teenagers we deal with are kids for whom school is their big concern. And a lot of those kids are actually doing pretty well right now, because they don't have to go into the high school and be around thousands of other kids and face teachers. The concern is, I think, that parents let them be too independent. I think you want to have eyes on, if you can negotiate it, have at least one meal a day with your kids, so you're seeing them, and just make sure you stay connected and that they know that you're there for them. Make sure you're keeping an eye to be healthy. I think depression is something that we want to be on the lookout for with everyone at this time, not knowing what the future will bring and not having the lives we're used to living, looking for signs of depression. The other interesting and kind of scary question is what the world's going to look like whenever this ends. And I personally worry that there will be a wave of school refusal, that kids who've been perfectly happy with the current system will say, I'm not going to go back. You didn't make me for this time. I don't want to go back now. And maybe that promotes reform, and we create a new generation of virtual schools that work for kids for whom in-person schooling is not the best. But it's going to be a challenge, because I think a lot of teenagers are experiencing a kind of free autonomy that they would if they were having to show up at school 5 days a week.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that angle. Fortunately, you know, for me personally, my kids, they're small enough. My daughter's really excited about going to kindergarten next year. That'll be fine. And my son likes school well enough, I suppose. Not as much as playing around, but well enough. But that is
I do want to
certainly a
talk about.
concern.
I don't want to lose sight. There's one special population of kids that I think deserve special consideration, and that's kids with learning disabilities and special needs. I think it's been particularly challenging for mental health providers, medical providers, and schools to find ways to provide those kids services virtually. And one thing that I'm seeing is that kids that are heavily reliant on individual supports at school, in some cases, for example, kids on the autism spectrum receiving behavioral services at school, and now they're not accessing those in anything like what they're used to. And that puts a burden on those children and their families, because again, that's a big part of their day-to-day life. Those kids tend to be in school through the summer, through Brookline Public Schools, and the fact that they're home now 24/7 is a particular challenge.
Thank you for calling that out. We just got a few minutes left. Can you tell us what folks can do to be helpful to the center? What can folks do in Brookline to take a positive step toward public mental health?
Yeah, first and foremost, reduce stigma. Be open and talking with people about your challenges, welcoming them to talk about their challenges, and always advocating to everyone who struggles to get help. There's no stigma in needing mental health services. That's why we're here. Most Americans need them at some point in their life, and you should get them. Don't suffer in silence. Our phone number, if people find that they are in need of help, they should call us and talk to our staff and see what we can do to help. So our phone number is 617-277-8107. Continue to support the Brookline Center, the Community Foundation, Brookline Housing Authority, all the organizations that help our friends and neighbors in need. We do, financially, it's a very tough time for us. So we do have a special fund, a COVID-19 Emergency Mental Health Response Fund, and those monies are going directly to help us provide services to families in need. And I should add, in addition to mental health services, we have something called Safety Net, which provides emergency financial funds to people who are having trouble with things like making their rent, or paying their utility bills. We do that in concert with the Brookline Community Foundation. And we anticipate the need only growing. And afterward, one thing Brookline is home to is a lot of people who work in healthcare. And we anticipate that they will also need extra services to deal with post-traumatic stress from what they're going through right now. So all hands are on deck with us, and we need all the support we can get from the community in kind so that we can continue to do what we do.
Well, Dr. Kaufman, I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. And I want to thank you for the work you're doing now and the work you've been doing. You and your colleagues, critical work, and it's the kind of thing that maybe doesn't get the glamour or the excitement, but is so important. Treatment now obviously dramatically reduces future pain and suffering of all kinds. So we do want to encourage you to keep doing the great work you're doing, and for folks who need help to go ahead and ask for it. I'm going to again put my name and information here. Look, I cannot personally help you with any mental or physical health challenges you face, but what I can do is help make sure that you have access to help, and I'm always happy to do that. So call me 617-872-8921. send me an email at tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. My office will certainly respect your privacy, but we do want to be able to help you if you're looking for help. And that can be related to health or, well, dang near anything else, COVID-19 or not. So again, thank you for watching. Thank you, Dr. Kaufman, for being with us. And I want to take this last moment to remind folks, we do have a town election coming up. It is not in May as is typical. It is on June 9th. And everyone can vote by mail. They do have to apply for it. Use the Google. Stay attuned, and we will get you more information later. I personally would encourage everyone to vote by mail on the June 9th election for select board and for town meeting members and so forth. But if you want to vote in person, you will still have that right as well. Once again, Tuesday, June 9th is that election, and you're watching Brookline Interactive. Thank you to the Brookline Interactive team for helping us put this together and for really being so responsive under this crisis. And tune in next week. We'll have another guest. I'm sure we'll still be talking about COVID-19. If you have any ideas about what you want to hear about, well, one last time, you know where to bring it, right? Let me know. I'll see what I can do for you. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for watching.